1. This story takes place when I was 17, in a small border town that I grew up in. I lived in a house on a steep hill, and I took the bus every morning and after school to come home. Classes started very early, and no other students lived on my small street. It must have been during the winter because it was very cold every morning, which isn't a usual thing where I lived. I remember being afraid every morning because it was very dark outside, and I only had the light of the moon to guide me. And back then, cell phones didn't have flashlights that you could use to guide your way in the dark. There were only 3 other houses on my small street, and they were all on a big hill with paved driveways going down and meeting a gravelly road. The houses were arranged around a gravel cul-de-sac, which many people used to turn around if they went down the wrong road. I live in a desert area, so there were leafless mesquite trees and cactus around, to where it was very reminiscent of a forest or dense flora area. It was so quiet that all you could hear were the bats fluttering around the one streetlight that decided to work on the off day. But usually it was just pitch black, along with the yapping of coyotes and crickets chirping. Other than that, all I could hear was the crunching of the gravel beneath my feet. The first time I saw the man in a van, I wasn't that surprised. A lot of the time we would get these white vans passing through because they delivered the papers to the surrounding houses. I then started to realize that this van was stopped right next to me when I was standing alone, waiting for the bus to arrive. There was a stop sign there, but there was no reason for the person in the van to be stopped there for 10 minutes until the bus picked me up. He must have started to get brave after that because he would roll his window down and ask me if I was cold. I'd say yes and ignore his presence and pretend like nothing happened. I just figured he was trying to be nice to me. He was an older Hispanic man in his 70s. Again, the next day he pulls up even closer to me. "Are you cold? You look beautiful today, but you look so cold." This time I just ignored him and waited for the bus to pull up, and I got in. I would watch his van pull away after my bus left. He kept doing this for 2 weeks until one day he looked at me through his window and said, "I could use a pretty girl like you. It's cold outside. You must be so cold. Come inside my van and I'll keep you warm until your bus gets here." I looked at him in horror, and luckily the bus pulled up a few seconds later, and I decided I needed to tell someone about him. My dad is in law enforcement, and I told my dad what had been happening. He asked me what he looked like and when the van would pull up. He said I should have told him sooner, but he's glad I told him when I did. He called the police, and I told the police what had been happening. They said they had similar reports in the area, and that they would catch him. The next day, the police hid behind me, where the cul-de-sac is, and I stood in my usual spot where I stood for the bus. I remember that day the streetlight was finally working, and I could see the man's face in the van. He didn't realize the officer was there until he made a full turn around the cul-de-sac and started towards me. The police turned their lights on and pulled him over. I could hear him yelling as the bus pulled in and I left for school. I could see the police lights glaring on the bus windows. The next day my dad sat me down and told me he had to talk to me. Apparently the man had many suspicious things in the van. He had duct tape, plastic bags, zip ties, condoms, lube, black trash bags, and a machete, and some other strange things. He claimed to be a newspaper man, and he would distribute the newspapers to my neighbors. Yet the police never found one newspaper in his van when they searched it. My dad ran a background check on him, and he had his CD passed. I'm not sure whatever happened to the man legally, but he never showed his face on the street again. But whenever I stood there at the end of the street, all I could think about is if he had gotten the courage to step out of his van, that I would have had no way to defend myself, and no one would have heard from me again. To the man in the white van, I hope no pretty, cold teenage girl ever meets you again. 2. Allow me to preface that this happened last year. I live on a small island, moved here 2 years ago, and I've heard that we have a bunch of sketchy people that live here. I've heard that a lot of things like drug deals happen at the large park in front of my neighborhood. It's a place with 3 soccer fields and 2 basketball diamonds. There are two sides of the park, so there are two respective parking lots, so you can park close to each field no matter what side you're on. These parking lots are not connected. When high school first started up and I didn't know the rumors of the area, I would walk the trail through the park that passes through both parking lots. I never really had a bad feeling about it, despite the fact of being scared because I was alone. I had only been walking that way for a couple of weeks by the time this happened. It was not unusual to see a few cars, usually 3 or 4. Sometimes people like to ride their bikes or walk on the Cross Island Trail before work. Because of this, I wasn't too put off when a car pulled into the lot. In fact, I didn't notice it at first, because the lots are big and have many parking spots, not to mention, I was listening to music. I only noticed the car when they pulled up right behind me, as I had just gotten to the point where the trail started again, right at the edge of the parking lot. There wasn't a spot there. In fact, there was a sign that said no parking any time. I got a bad feeling and turned off my music, keeping the earbuds in because I started to get too scared to really move. I walked a little faster, hearing laughing. I guess their window was open. There's a bend in the trail as it walks you to the other parking lot. The bend allowed me to use my peripherals to get a look at the car as it started to slowly move towards the exit where they came from, of that parking lot. The car was one of those ugly tan colors. Kinda looked ratty, and was one of those generic cheap cars you see at sketchy places. I figured they were leaving until they went my way and pulled into the second parking lot before I reached it. I saw 2 people inside but no faces as they sped down to the end of the long parking lot. I started walking faster and just managed to cross the opening of the parking lot entrance before they sped back up the lot and stopped right at the entrance to the trail again. I was thoroughly freaked out at this point because they had got onto the street and into this parking lot just to follow me. There was muttering and laughing as I walked. I wasn't able to make out what they were saying. I was probably too nervous at that point. But I pulled out my phone to look busy. They were so close when they first pulled up, I was within arm's reach almost. I know because I used my phone screen to reflect the image. At one point of my fast walking, I heard a noise. I don't know if they hit the dashboard or something, but my fear told me it was the thump of a car door shutting or opening or something. I ran, a chore for a fat kid like me, but I sprinted the last quarter mile to school without looking back. I called my mom and was almost in tears as soon as I reached the school. I was heavy breathing, my stomach hurt to the point I thought I was going to throw up. And the shaking was so bad it lasted until my 3rd period. She advised me to try and calm down, then go report it to the office, which I did, after standing in the bathroom for a while. I talked with the principal after talking to the front desk lady who got him right away when I told her what happened. He was very concerned and even asked if I needed to go home. He said he would let the police know, and he actually did. The next day I took the shorter way, on the outskirts of my neighborhood and the park. I could see into the park and there was a cop car there. I've never walked that way to school again, but I do wonder why the people in the car were doing that. Part of me wonders if I was going to be trafficked, but the more insecure part wonders if they were laughing at the way I look. Most likely not, though. I'm not obese, just a bit overweight. However, why would they be laughing and why would they follow me? Whatever it is, let's not meet. 3. Please be aware that while no acts are directly depicted, there are suggestions of animal cruelty contained within this story. It is not graphic, but those of a sensitive nature may wish to skip this story. In 2002, my husband was deployed out of the country for 15 straight months, and I kept our housing unit occupied, on a military post in the Eastern Time Zone, halfway between Canada and Mexico, with our 2 children, 2 cats, and my 90-pound bulldog mastiff mix. I worked at a large, privately owned wildlife rehab a day or 2 a week. This charity participated in a bingo charity nearby to raise funds, and it competed with another charity run by 2 people who claimed to be in witness protection for witnessing a murder up north. They were sketchy people, to say the least. I met 2 people who were terrified after dealing with them, and they claimed ignorance as to why 2 large dogs and cats disappeared in their care. During the 15-month separation, I decided that our oldest was ready to assume the responsibility of caring for the housing unit, with the help of a neighbor, while I left for short periods of time. He learned how to answer the phone, to lock the doors, how to call our bulldog to the main doors should anyone cause any problems, and how to call our neighbor if anything seemed amiss or if anyone got hurt. So too did our youngest. This being so, I asked our neighbor to be on call one night as I drove to a super Walmart to get groceries. She agreed, and I left in our two-door tracker soft top. The Walmart I went to was 15 miles away in a slightly larger city than the one nearest post. Its main parking lot was very long, as the sides had no spots. To its left was a Lowe's. I parked about 15 spaces away from the storefronts, so I was much closer to the side road leading to Lowe's than to the store itself. When I parked, there were a few cars by mine, and it was dusk. When I came out about 25 minutes later, it was fully dark, around 9:15 p.m., and my car was one of the only cars at the end of the parking lot. There was one car by mine, though, a van. It was one of those windowless utility vans like from the 70s. Or at least the design had never been updated. It was a dull white. The weird thing about the van was that it was parked ahead of my car. Lest I would have never seen my car at all. See, two-door trackers are short. Even in a regularly parked manner, they are not visible from the bottom of a parking aisle, as most all other cars are longer than it. The van was the only car parked by mine at all, and it was parked almost in between the space next to mine and the space in front of itself. As I approached the back of my tracker, I was going to put the groceries in the back, I saw that the van was parked in such a way so that its sliding door on the right side was adjacent to my driver's side door. It was also parked rather closely, so that if I opened my driver's side door as someone slid open the van's side door, I could not run forward in between the two. This shit gave me the willies. I remember very well putting plastic bags of Walmart crap in the back of the car and wondering just why someone would park like that. Why? Here's the thing about shit like this, too. When a female, young woman, chica, girl, however you categorize us, sees something this freaky in real life, she might not get it. Unless she grew up in Detroit or the west side of Cleveland, danger signs blink a little slower, or worse, we're told by our family that we're imagining things when we report that we're scared about something. I had given birth to a child in a foreign country, ran across country in a place where boar hogs roamed, and taken care of many situations with crazy neighbors without a man before, hence the big dog. But I still stood there at the back of the tracker trying to figure out why I was unsettled. It happens. I think we don't think that the worst can happen, which is why, when and if it does, we might freeze. It never occurs to us that we might really be in trouble. All this being so, I decided to listen to the idiot voice in my head, and I closed the back of the tracker and walked over to the passenger side of the car. I unlocked it, tossed my purse in the back, and crawled over the stick shift as fast as I could, closing the door quickly behind me and hitting the lock. I then shoved the key into the ignition while slamming down the emergency brake, put the car into first, and gave gas. I pulled away from the van, turned right, and sped away to the Lowe's portion of the parking lot, all without putting on my seatbelt or turning on the lights. By the time I pulled another right around to face the same direction, the van was still there. I put on my seatbelt, and as I began to adjust myself, the van left. I drove home carefully. When I got home, the kids were fine, and our dog was happy, and the neighbor said nothing amiss happened. This might be the end of the story, but it isn't. A few weeks later, I had to go to Walmart again, and the neighbor said she also needed a thing or two, so I told her we could barter. I bought her 2 things, and she kept an eye on my children. Again, I parked near the end of the parking lot. This time, however, I took our other car, a 4-door hardtop, 5-speed tracker. We liked the cars, sue me. I shopped quickly upon leaving the store and walking toward our car with the cart. I stopped dead in my tracks, about 10 spaces out, because a windowless white utility van was parked near our car, but parked slightly forward. Again, I must have stood there for 20 seconds trying to gather what was happening. I take this time to redress the concept of reality. Was this shit really happening? I can only remember certain things about that moment. I know I turned my cart around. I know I felt numb. I know I felt like I was floating, not walking, and that I was floating too slowly to get back to the store for my liking. I remember that my teeth thudded in my head with every footstep, even though I was floating. When I did get to the building, I walked up to the tallest person in a blue vest and cheerfully asked if he could walk me out to my car. I did not say, "Someone is trying to abduct me." I seem to remember thinking that would discredit me. It all happened very quickly. So instead, I asked nicely if I could have an escort to my car. He nudged his chin up in another person's direction and walked with me toward the doors. When we got outside, though, the white van was gone. I figured it might be, but that made me wonder if I imagined it. I wish I could explain that. Anywho, I told him I would just really appreciate it if he watched me load my groceries and drive away. He was very nice, he did just that. As I drove home, I watched for trailing cars. None, I hope. Anyway, by then 9/11 had occurred, sadly, and it was hard to get on post without an ID. I called the police that night and told them about both incidents. I did not file a report, but I left my phone number and said I would come in if anyone else experienced a white van issue, as I thought I was not taken seriously. I take responsibility for not calling the police the first time. I stopped working for the charity a while later. Later that year, decomposed animal bodies like rotties were dug up by the people who lived near the property of the witness protection charity owners. Nothing was done about the skeletons. Rotty killers, white van owners, Walmart parking lot creepers. Let's not meet. Ever. I did assume the white van person or persons was and were involved with the competing charity I worked for. There were some weird and awful things that occurred surrounding that other charity in the 2 years that I was heavily involved with my rehab. The discovery of corpses of dogs and cats as the worst. They claimed to be from Chicago, and having dealt with the animal rights group Shark, they said they were witnesses to a murder associated with the group. I think now they were people who liked to be the center of attention and used their charity for income. They seemed jealous of my boss, who was an absolute angel. Every year, she alone rehabilitated and released over 1,000 birds to the local area that had been brought in. They were mostly babies that fall out of nests and injured raptor-type predators. As to the parking, for those wondering why I may not have parked closer to the store, I always parked far away from the storefront. People leave their carts all over, and I just didn't want my car dinged. Boy, did I learn my lesson. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 420. No jokes, please, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, it just occurred to me, when this goes up, it will be August the 5th, my birthday next month, Christmas not long after. Years whooshed by. I have to start, I don't have to start thinking about Christmas presents. Niece and nephew, they're pretty easy to take care of now. They're old enough, they just want money. But yes, it's snuck up on us is what it's done. Right, there may have been a stream at some point over the weekend where I had guests on. If it did, I hope it went well. And if it worked out, we might end up doing more. Maybe we'll get other people on who want to play as well. Needn't necessarily be the same game, but it will have to be a game that's easily acquirable. Ideally a free game like Star Trek Online or something like that. That can be played by most systems to give most people options. So we'll see how all that shakes out. I do hope it works out, because I don't usually play games with people a lot. I tend to play most of them on my own and enjoy it more that way. But if it works out, it'd give us an extra thing to do. Okay, so August, I'm gonna have to start thinking about taking a week off soon. Don't worry, if I do take the week off, when I take the week off, I intend to make sure the channel keeps running as I always do. So if I want to do it in September, maybe take the week of my birthday off, that's usually a good one to do, I should probably start planning things out now. Let's see, it will be... Oh, my birthday's... Yeah, that should be okay. Because I don't want to do it the week I'd be working on the glitch video, because that's a lot of extra work, so I don't want to do it that week. Yeah, so probably the 19th of September is a Thursday, so it'll be the week from the 16th right through to the 23rd, yeah, around about then. So I'm going to try and take that week off, so I'll have to start planning things out now, just to make sure I've got plenty of material to be getting on with, so that the channel keeps running. Yeah, it should work out, it usually does, and I've got plenty of time to do it. Okay, I think that's everything I needed to cover. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.